Welcome to the Evolve Beyond Limits podcast. I'm your host, Stacy Gissal. This podcast is dedicated to helping you create a life that sets your soul on fire. I believe that is truly possible for everybody, but you have to be willing to do a few things. You have to be willing to let go of your past conditioning. You have to be willing to break free from societal norms. And you have to be willing to get really curious about your life and how you can start to look at it differently. Each week, we will hear stories from people who have done exactly this. People who chose to disrupt the life path they were on, go against the grain, and share the lessons and perspective shifts they had to make along the way. Every episode is committed to not only inspiring you and connecting you with other amazing humans, but actually giving you the tools you need to use this information in your own life so that you continue to evolve and reconnect with your highest self. Are you ready? Let's have some fun. Welcome to this week's episode of the Evolve Beyond Limits podcast. And this week, I am stoked to share with you my dear friend, Mo Copeland. The way that we connected, you will actually hear in this episode, but it is something that I love to attribute to divine intervention. It was one of those moments where the right people come into your life at the exact right time, and his wisdom in this episode is something that struck me. You will hear on this episode, and you will see the first time I have ever cried in a podcast interview. And it was just a very special episode with a very, very special man. And a little bit about Mo is, after years of living in these stuck patterns he inherited, he managed to flip the script of his life. He walked away from his workaday experience and theology of his youth and began to explore what it means to cultivate a life that is more likely to produce an authentic, true him. So again, we get into everything, so many different beautiful conversations, and just listening to Mo and his story, I think there's going to be a lot that you pull from this. So as always, make sure you stick around for the post show where I will speak a little bit more about something that I took away and that Mo reminded me of in this beautiful episode. All right, let's get to it. Enjoy. All right. Okay. Welcome, Mo. I am so grateful to have you on the show today. And I love your background. I love that you're outside.
Yeah. Well, I love being outside, but this was not a choice today. I got thrown out into the wild. Sarah, my wife, is on a work meeting and in our travel trailer, and there's not enough room in this town for both of us. So I had to go.
Yeah. It's funny because Andrew and I, so we just got a Class B RV. So there is no longer room for two people in that doing things ever again. So I totally get it. And I'm really glad that you're outdoors. I know that it was kind of on accident, but I will not have this beautiful background behind me. I'll have different backgrounds probably from in a lot of the podcasts. So this is just getting people used to it. I like it.
There you go.
I love it. Well, as you know, I like to start with just a few questions so that the listeners can get to know you a little bit better. So are you up for that?
I am. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So the first two are just kind of, people tend to answer them together. So I'm just going to ask them together. Where are you originally from? And then where are you living now?
How about it's complicated? I was born, and the reason I say is I was born in a little town called Dangerfield, Texas. That's only about an hour from where I'm sitting now. But when I was very young, we moved to Alpine, Texas, which is out in Big Bend National Park country, out in the high mountain. That's kind of where I spent my formative years. So if you ask me where I'm from, that's what I say. It's technically a lie, but that's where I'm from. But where I am right now is out in the middle of nowhere, about 6 miles south of Como, Texas. So we're kind of up in that northeastern part of Texas. We're about an hour due east of Dallas, hour and a half due east of Dallas, just out in the middle of some country sitting on a farm that we're trying to build out. So that's where we are.
Good. I don't know that Andrew will ever drive through Dallas again. I thought we went through Dallas a few months ago and I thought he was going to have a meltdown trying to drive through Dallas in our big RV. Now it might be easier, but it was so funny.
I haven't lost anything in Dallas that I feel compelled to go look for. I'll put it that way.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so we just heard about your wife because she kicked you out of the out of the trailer. But how about pets or family? Any other family that we should know about?
Oh, geez, I've got 4 kids: Caitlin, Megan, Ash, and Jackson. Shout out to them. I've got 2 grandkids, Parker and Adeline, and then our baby Morty is a 5-month-old blue heeler who is he's my best bud, but he's also part velociraptor, so sometimes he's a terrorist.
Oh, aren't they? Aren't they? They're like, they have that like that they can really flip on you. That is awesome. And I have seen him on your Instagram and he just cracks me up every time. He seems like he has such a big personality. So, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about your kids. So I love it. Okay. Where is your favorite place to travel?
I've got to say in general, the mountains of the American West. You know, I love Colorado. I've spent quite a bit of time in Colorado riding adventure motorcycles off-road over the Rockies up through those gnarly mountain passes, especially down in the Southwest. I've done off-road trips up through Idaho. Basically, my favorite places to travel are off-road and over that high, beautiful, rugged mountain terrain. That's my favorite by far. I'm a mountain guy, not a beach guy.
Yeah, there's something about the mountains, and Andrew and I have actually recognized that too. We don't love the beach either. Like I love water, but I'm fine with it being like a river or a lake. Like, and I like to look at the water, but I don't have to be on a beach necessarily. So right. I'm with you on that for sure. Okay, what is some place you've always wanted to go?
I've listened to some of your other podcasts. People will talk about Greece and all these different countries. I've always wanted to go to Glacier National Park, and I got this close last year. I guess it was early last year, but it was closed because of COVID, or most of it was. They had a lot of it shut down, and I was only an hour away, and we just made the decision not to go. So that's still on my bucket list, Glacier National Park. I'd like to go to Alaska. Alaska is another place I want to travel.
Yeah, we actually thought about going to Glacier here soon, and we just heard that it actually just started to open back up, but it is like you have to get a reservation to go. So you'll make it happen. You'll make it happen. Oh, yeah. It's coming back. Okay, Mo, what do you have the most fun doing?
It sounds really general, just being outside. I love like right now I'm working on the farm and cutting and restoring property that has been neglected for about 50 or 75 years. So I'm cutting brush and mowing and pulling down vines. And I love that. Or I love backpacking. I love hiking. Back in the day when I was younger, I used to really love to hunt, but that I don't have quite as much of a grudge against animals as I did back then. So
it's funny. I hunt. I do actually hunt, which is always kind of a interesting fact for people. But yeah, and it's for me. I only do it for the meat. Like it's just like my dad and my sister will go out turkey hunting, and I don't know if you've ever had like wild turkey, but it kind of tastes like crap in my opinion. Like it's not good. So I'm like, I have no desire to go out and hunt a turkey that's going to taste like shit. So, so good. All right, Mo, what is your favorite book?
Well, favorite book, as Homer Simpson would say so far, would probably be Michael Singer's Untethered Soul, just because it gave me so much language for what I was struggling with and really kind of propelled me forward. Yeah, so that one, just because of the the value it's brought to my life would probably be my favorite book. And of course, after that, there's a long list of books, but that I really enjoy. But that would be probably my number one.
That was a huge book for me too. And then I don't know if you've read his other one, The Surrender Experiment, but that was a really good book at a time where I thought that control was the answer to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I had learned a big lesson in that. So I love that book too. And something I've been doing lately is actually going back and reading some of those books that were so profound for me, because I think what's so cool about books is that they speak to you in different ways depending on where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I that actually kind of gave me what I like to call the little wink to go maybe reread that one. So I like that.
Yeah, it's like Eckhart Tolle's book, not The Power of Now, the other one he wrote,
A New Earth.
A New Earth. I've read that book probably 6 times, and it's dog-eared and it's underlined and highlighted, and so it was kind of a toss-up, because I mean that was the book that broke me out of my way of thinking. But as far as value, pragmatic value, it has to be The Untethered Soul. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in about The Power of Now. I mean, A New Earth. That's another. That was right there with Michael Singer's book. But
yeah, I think there's just like it's beautiful. I love to read. I love to learn, and I think that it is funny when, like, I just don't believe things necessarily happen on accident, and it's like there is usually a reason why we're drawn to, like, somebody asked me the other day, like, how do you decide what book you're going to read next? And I was like, I kind of let them come to me. Like, it's really interesting. It's either I hear it from somebody who, or somebody recommends me a book at like the right time, or sometimes it's just my intuition saying like, and it's amazing because it always has something in there that you're like, wow, this is profound for me in where I'm at and where I'm going. And yeah, so I think I'm glad that you mentioned that one too. I have read that book, and I probably need to. So often there's so many books, right? And there's so many things to learn that we go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's like, what if we just went back?
well,
like,
so yeah, and on to that point, I think the way I have always learned is, as I'm making these shifts in my life, and sometimes I didn't even realize I was making a shift, but I'm the type of personality, I guess, and I get really interested in something, and I just want to get all the information I can get. So I'm like drinking from a fire hose for a period of time. But then I'm like, I just have to put it down and walk away from it, because I've absorbed so much. And then it feels like there's a period of, it could be a week, or it could be a few months of where I have to integrate that into my being, and the parts of it that are true to me and the parts that are useful to me somehow. And it's not that I'm thinking, I'm going to integrate this knowledge. It just happens. But it's somehow I'm able to integrate that into my being. And then a lot of times I'll go back, like you said, and read more, and then I'll see other things. And but yeah, at first, man, it's like I'm hearing all these different voices and paying attention to all these different things, and just overwhelming amounts of information. It drives my wife crazy because I'm excited about it. That's all I want to talk about, and then I kind of hit the pause button on everything, and I'll just be really quiet for a week or months or whatever. And while I integrate that into my being, but that's how I don't know. That's just how I've always progressed.
well, and I think I love that you actually brought this up, because this is the part that most people miss, is that they soak up all of the knowledge, and like, we don't have a knowledge or an information problem. We have an integration problem or an implementation problem, or like a constant learning problem. And it's only when we take knowledge and put it into action does it then become wisdom. And often what people like, I love what you do, because what you're doing when you take that step away from something and you allow it to kind of integrate into your life is you're not taking somebody else's word and making it your own. You are like experimenting with what was like put forward in like this book or whatever it is that we're learning from. I always talk about this with like the women that I lead is like, I don't want you to just simply take what I say as truth for you, because it may not be what's true for you. And you have to sit with it in your heart. And that's where you get to decide, this is for me, this maybe isn't for me. And so I love that we're even talking about this, because I think it's actually a huge missing link, is that we absorb all of this information and then we actually grow further away from ourselves if we're not careful, because then we start to believe that everyone else's ideas are better than the ideas that are within us and what our heart is.
Well, and I can tell you what I've learned, and it's true for me. I don't know if it's true for anybody else, but I'm 52 years old, and I can tell you in 52 years, I've learned that the most valuable knowledge that I've gleaned in my lifetime did not come from a book. It came from experiential learning. And I haven't read that many books when it comes to, spiritual, the spiritual journey outside of a theology. Okay. I've read maybe 4 or 5 books max. And I honestly, it's not that I have anything against them. I just haven't made space in my life. I mean, I read Eckhart Tolle, New Earth. I read Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul. I read Alan Watts. I read Shunryu Suzuki, the Zen Buddhist. I can't remember the other one I read, but I think there was one other book that I read. There may be a couple more, but I have not been a vociferous reader of kind of this philosophy or ideology. Most of the conclusions that I've come to experientially. And then it's crazy to me because I'll be sharing it with somebody, and then, like the other day, I was talking to my daughter, and she said, Dr. Nicole LaPera, who's the holistic psychologist on Instagram, I recommend everybody follow her. So I was talking to my daughter about this concept, and she's doing the program with Dr. Nicole, and she said that's exactly what she said. And I was kind of blown away by that, because I thought, how can two people from vastly different backgrounds, vastly different locations, vastly different life experiences come to such an amazingly same conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
And so that lends some validity to it to me and makes it feel even more true.
Yeah.
And and it didn't come to me from a book. It came to me from just paying attention.
Paying attention to, and this is, oh gosh, I want people to hear your story. So we are going to get there, but this is such everything that we need is within us.
Bingo.
Right? Everything that we need is within us. And this is, people search outside of themselves to try to find the answers, but everything you need to know is within you. And maybe sometimes that will be sparked by I always say, God talks, in whether you believe in God or source or whatever it is. But it's like you're always being spoken to, whether that be a conversation between you and I, whether that be a book you read, whether that be a song lyric that hits you. But the only reason that you're able to it's kind of speaking to you in that moment is because it's already within you. You already have that information. You just have to know how to tap into it.
Yeah. And we can get into this a little later, but my background for the first 3.5 decades of my life was actually longer than that. The first 4+ decades of my life was in a very structured theological framework, and I studied the Bible, memorized a huge part of it, and I studied theology and doctrine and all those different things. And it wasn't until I started to break away from it that I really began to understand some of it. And what you just said, I've talked to Christian people, and that in my experience tended to look for something outside of themselves to complete them or rescue them or whatever. And I would talk to them and I would say, look, this thing that I'm talking about, that you have it within yourself, is not an anti-Christian theology. And I believe it's in First Peter, he said, God has given you everything you need for life and godliness. And so those two words, life, is pretty self-explanatory. Godliness is being like God. So, and it's past tense. He has given you. You already have it within yourself, everything you need. And so as I would counsel with people or talk to people, and they'd say, oh, but I don't have any patience. And I would say, yes, you do. You have patience. It's not that you need more patience. You need to learn how to draw out from yourself the patience that you already have. Because if you have a 1-year-old child that's learning how to walk, you don't look at that child and when they fall down on their little butt and say, you stupid idiot, what's wrong with you? Well, quit being such a baby. Get up and walk. No, you're patient with that child because you understand. But then to scream at a spouse or somebody else and get angry with them and lose their patience, it's not that you need more patience. You need to understand that person that you're reacting to is a person just like that 1-year-old and deserves a little bit of grace. And so you can have the same patience. You just have to, and I'm not saying you go around looking at everybody like a 1-year-old child, but you have to understand that, and that's where the compassion and the empathy comes in, that we're all learning, and a lot of us are going to screw it up a lot before we figure it out. And so it's okay for people to fall down,
Mm.
and if we really want to be there and be present, help them back up and get them on their way instead of losing your temper. And trust me, I'm still a long way from enlightenment. I'll just put it that way. So
aren't we all? That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the one thing I just want to elaborate on when you said that is that same attitude you have to give to yourself. And that, I think, is like, it's almost easier to be patient with somebody else and learn that than it is to have that same type of grace and compassion for yourself when you screw up, because you're going to do it all the time. And I have just learned that, like, and it's not that I never do this, again, still a work in progress over here, but I don't beat myself up over the decisions that I have made, or the things that, maybe I haven't done perfectly, because it doesn't move me forward to get hung up on that. Right. I have to give myself the same compassion and grace that I'd be willing to give somebody else. And go ahead.
Can I interject something right there?
Yeah.
I think the last time you and I met was out in the desert in, I guess, October. And I've changed a lot since then. And one of the things that I was still struggling with pretty hard when we met before was that self-condemnation. And I had a moment of clarity one night when I was sitting out looking at the stars, and I was open to it, and it just popped into my head. I think one of the reasons that we're so hard on ourselves is that we think we understand ourselves. We know we don't understand other people. We know that there's always that possibility that maybe the guy that's being a jackass on the freeway is trying to get to the hospital to see his his dying mother or something. So we can make excuses for others, but we know our own story, right? Or at least we think we do. And we lose sight of the fact that we are as difficult to grasp as that person who's outside of us is. And that the reality we think we know about ourselves is hardly ever true. It's the mind voice, the ego story that we've told ourselves is what we've bought into. And that's what we understand, but we don't understand the reality. And so just knowing that fact made it so much easier for me to give myself grace and say, you know what? Yeah, it was a boneheaded decision, but it's okay. I was making my way in the world. I was finding the middle path. And that was a pretty powerful realization for me, is that we do that because we think we understand ourselves, and we don't.
Yeah.
We really don't.
Yeah. And I am It's funny because when I work with people, I work with them a lot on self discovery, and it's really funny because we think that in order to become more of who we are, that we need to add things, that we have to do more. And
No.
the first thing I try to get through everybody's head is that, like, we are like, we actually have to strip things away. Like, think about it more in the essence of like a sculptor, right? Where they start with this block of whatever it may be, clay, whatever, and they have this vision of what they want at the end, and they don't add, they take away. They take away over and over and over and over until at the end of it, we have this beautiful sculpture of what we wanted it to be and who we actually are. And that's the same thing with this whole self-discovery path and learning, is that we have to actually strip away so much of what we have been taught or what has been placed on us in order to actually figure out who we are. And it is such a process. It's a lifelong process. And that's where patience, right? We have to give ourselves the patience to always be finding things to kind of strip away. Like, oh gosh, that's not me either, And I always say there's nothing innately negative about anybody, about any soul. There's nothing innately negative. So if there's something about you that you look and you're like, oh, I hate this part of myself, it's not actually you. So you get to take that away.
Yeah. And what's the old saying that transformation is not becoming something else, it's becoming who you really are.
Yes. Yes. And I tell every person I work with, I'm like, I'm not here to help turn you into somebody else. It's to rediscover who you've always been. And, but I had to go through that transformation too, because I was walking around with trying to prove myself to every single person. I was walking around trying to, again, control every aspect of my life. I was walking around trying to be what I thought everyone else wanted me to be. And every time we do that, we actually take us another step away from who we actually are. We want to fit in.
Yeah. So I wrote, as you know, your listeners don't yet, but I'm still working on a book. And in one of the chapters, I think it's chapter 5, I talk about persona. And I start off just asking the question, why do you wear the clothes you wear? Because there's something that I've observed in myself, and I believe it to be true for almost everyone else on the planet, is that there's a certain image that we want to portray. Okay. I got up and put on this orange Prana t-shirt this morning for a reason, because I'm going on the Stacy Gissal podcast, and there's a certain image that I want to portray. Right. Yeah. And so we dress ourselves up or put on makeup or cut our hair a certain way. There's this image. And really, I think at the end of the day, and you can make your own judgment as far as whether it's good or bad. At the end of the day, we are trying to manipulate other people's perception of us. We want to manage who they see. And so one of the things that I go into is that I did an extreme form of that, to the point that, my insecurities stemming from things that happened when I was a child, and it took me years to work through it. But I actually became a liar and would make up stories and tell them because I thought that people would not like me the way I was. And I needed to be more. I needed to be something else in order for people to like me. So I would make up these stories. And I hated that aspect of myself, right? But I couldn't stop it. I became a slave to it. And it wasn't until I finally somehow found the courage to confront that lie and tell the truth. And then through a lot of other work, I realized what the source of that insecurity was. And when I dealt with that, well, then the compulsive lying went away, and I didn't need it anymore. And so that was a really exciting journey for me. But my whole point is, in the chapter, one of the things that I had to do was I actually named this persona. I call him Mr. Ambassador. And so in the past, I might walk into a room, I'm a pretty big guy, and I would walk into a room and I would change my voice and, hey, everybody, how are y'all doing? And I would adopt this kind of country loud personality because it's a little intimidating. And it was a way of protecting myself. It's not that I was trying to be an asshole. I was protecting myself because inside I'm not a 6'1", 250-pound man. I'm a 12-year-old kid whose dad doesn't like him and whose mom wishes he had never been born. So that's who I was trying to protect. But this persona, I call him Mr. Ambassador. And so now I have enough space in my awareness that I can see this persona when it comes up. And I'll literally speak to it. I'll just say, hey, Mr. Ambassador, your services won't be needed today. And, I appreciate you trying to help, but I got this. And so I try to be very conscious about that persona speaking for me. Because that's what it is. It's me sending someone else into the world because I don't have courage to go on my own. And so that's another thing that I've worked through. And I'm sorry, I've rambled so long, I forgot kind of how that tied into what you were saying.
That's okay. That's okay. It was exactly what somebody needed to hear. And I think that the persona in Latin actually is mask, which is kind of fascinating. So like when you think about that, we start that, like you said, at like 8 years old, we start to put on the masks that we need, that we feel like we need to wear in order to fit in order to be liked, in order to fit into society's ideas of who we should be. And then it only takes I think what's so powerful is that I love that you kind of make it fun and you make it a game. And I could not recommend this more to anybody who's going through trying to figure these things out about themselves, because you do have to have fun with it, name it, okay, here I see you're coming. Right.
Yeah.
But the powerful thing is that you were willing to face it. Right. And that is the part that most people either don't feel as if they just haven't opened their eyes enough to see that we all have things that we need to kind of work through. Or there's a fear. There's a fear behind what's going to come up if I turn inward and if I start to face maybe the shadow aspects of myself. And I just want to, shadow aspects of us are not bad. Shadow aspects are the aspects of us that that are going to hold us back if we don't bring them to the surface and allow, like what you did, for that transformation. So my question is for you, all right. So we didn't really even get a chance to say this, but Mo and I met in a very funny way. And quite honestly, if I didn't believe in divine intervention before this is one of those stories that was just so funny. So, Andrew and I were driving. It was our first time to Sedona. I was getting ready. I was putting on a retreat, and Andrew had this pin on these back roads where you could just go and boondock. Right. And for somebody who doesn't know what boondocking is, it's just you just go and park on the side of the road and there's no electricity. There's nothing. You just go and you park, but it's free. So he had this pin, and he's we had this 30-foot RV that probably had no, it probably shouldn't have been back on these roads. They were so bumpy. They were so crazy. And Andrew just kept he was maybe we should just park here. Maybe we should just park here. And I was no, you had this pin, you had this place picked out. Let's get there. Who cares? We'll just get there. And so we kept going. And then we find where we're supposed to go. And we park because we're well, we're not really sure if we can continue to go forward or not. And when you're in a 30-foot RV, one thing you learn is don't just keep going. So
yeah. You're better off to stop.
Yeah, we got to stop and see what's coming. So we went up. And next thing we know, we walk back and you walk out and you are hey, if you want, you can park here. It's getting ready to be dark. You don't want to be around, trying to figure out where you're going to go in the dark. And well, what's really funny is that Andrew specifically is very much one to be that's okay. We're not going to bother you. We'll just we'll find a spot. But for whatever reason, he was like, okay, that's actually really nice of you. Let's do that. And then like later on, you guys, this is what's so funny, is that we find out that Mo and Sarah like literally had their campsite set up so that no one would park by them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
exactly.
I understand. I would totally do that too. And that's like nothing against you guys. I think it's so cute. And so, but for whatever reason, they saw us and they were like, I think Sarah was the one that was like, run out there and see if they just want to stay here. And so then it was just like, it was a whole, the next day, Mo overheard me talking about chakras with somebody. And then we started a conversation and it was just, we spent the whole night chatting away and it was just a really amazing experience. And that's, again, this is just one of those things that I'm like, these types of things just remind me that, things happen as they should, I guess. And so it was so fun. But when we were talking, you were telling me about your story and how you came to this. So I think it's important for people to know that you mentioned it briefly that you spent 3.5 decades, living your life one way in a very structured environment, which I would love for you to speak more about. And then like, how did this transition or this shift happen to get to where you are, now, where you have the ability to call out your personas and call out your ego and all of that, because none of this happens. It happens in a very different way, I guess. So do you mind talking more about your story?
No, I don't mind a bit. I'll just start from the beginning and I'll try to give you the elevator pitch version of it because there's 52 years of living and adventure. So I'll just hit the high points. I was born the third child, the unplanned child of a United Pentecostal preacher and his wife. My two sisters are 12 and 10 years older than me. So it was almost like being born an only child. My father actually committed her to an institution at one point for a few days. I think she was probably bipolar and had several other personality disorders. And she was, she was fairly stable as long as she didn't have any stressors whatsoever. But anything would set her off. And so I grew up in this home where my relationship with my mother was very, very fragile. It could explode at any moment, and she was a big woman. She was 5'11" and probably, close to 250 pounds. And she was one of those just raw boned West Texas women. And, for example, one time she was putting a pan of taco shells into the oven and she accidentally burned her thumb. And the next thing I knew, she just exploded and she stomped that pan of taco shells into microscopic pieces and then picked the hot pan up and just wadded it up like a ball of aluminum foil. So, I mean, this is the kind of rage that she would fly into. And my father, as a component of living with her and then just his own unconsciousness, he had this notion that I needed to be like him. And so he would take me to work with him from a very young age. And he would say things like, he'd get frustrated with me because I didn't perform the way he wanted or what have you. And he would say things like, you're never going to amount to anything. Why can't you be like me? When I was 17 years old, I was working a job and giving my mom my paycheck and all this stuff. So that's kind of the way I was formed as a child. And then everything was underpinned by this very strong fundamentalist, uber conservative, United Pentecostal theology. And when I say the name of the organization, I'm not trying to call them out or say anything negative about them, but you hear the word Pentecostal thrown around sometimes, and people are like, oh, I was Pentecostal. And I look at them and I'm like, no, you weren't Pentecostal. We were Pentecostal because, ours was a oneness theology. We didn't believe in the Trinity. We believed that you had to speak in tongues as evidence of your salvation. Otherwise, you weren't saved. We believed very much in heaven and hell. So if you ran off the road and you said shit right before you hit a tree and got killed, you were going to hell because that was unrepented sin. My sisters, no women could wear makeup or cut their hair. They had to wear long skirts, and I couldn't go swimming with my sisters. That was mixed bathing. It was just this, like I said, it was a fundamentalist group. So that's how I was formed. And I never really fit the mold because, like, when I was 12, I remember asking the question, if the great flood flooded the entire earth, how in the hell did Noah and his family breathe? Because they would have been higher than Mount Everest, right? And at that level of of atmosphere, it would have been super cold and there wouldn't have been any oxygen. So I was asking these questions, and when I would ask about why do women have to wear dresses, and they'd say, well, Deuteronomy, it says that a woman shall not wear that which pertains to a man and vice versa. I would say, yeah, but 4 verses later, it also says you have to have a handrail around your roof so that nobody falls off and dies and brings shame on your house. But we don't have handrails around our roofs, so why are we emphasizing this other one? So I was in that mode from a very early age, which meant that I didn't really fit in that way well in some circles. So anyway, flash forward, I got married. I was married for 7 years. Got divorced. I had 2 daughters, Caitlin and Megan, out of that relationship. I met my wife, Sarah, and we got married and had our first son, and then started the 3 year, what I call the 3 years of hell. And in these intervening years, I had worked as a youth pastor in a church, and I had done some preaching. So I felt that call to the ministry, is the way that we framed it. And I thought that I was going to be a Pentecostal preacher. When I got divorced, that shot that in the head, because I could not be an ordained United Pentecostal preacher as a divorced man, even though there was cause for the divorce. So anyway.
So can I ask you something, Mo?
Yeah,
can I ask you something about that?
Yeah.
Because, like, how did you still, because I feel like there's people who, like, how did you still make that decision? Or how did you feel about yourself with still making the decision to get the divorce? Because, like, you obviously knew that within yourself, that was 100% what was best for you. But the belief system said that is not what's best for you. So how did you kind of wrestle with that?
Well, so when you're riding the end of the bullwhip, you get a lot of this back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. There's not this, just a wavering in the center. There's an extreme back and forth when I call it riding the end of the bullwhip. And that's what I was doing. I was riding the end of the bullwhip. That's operating on the extremes. When you're on the extremes and you're looking for the middle path, that little side-to-side meandering becomes a wild oscillation. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I would alternate between, and you got to understand, I'm trying to leave that woman out of it as much as I can. But my first wife, there were 3 times that she committed adultery. The second time was with my brother-in-law and split up him and my sister. And then the third time was with my friend. So I really didn't have much choice. Yeah. That decision was kind of made for me. And I had tried to keep it together for the sake of the kids and all the, religious reasons that you would stay together. And I got a lot of pushback. In fact, my own father, during that 3 years of hell that I'll talk about in a second, one day I told him, you'll understand why I said it, but I told him, I said, I'm so thankful that God sent me Sarah. And he got like super pissed off at me and wheeled around and just snapped. And he said, don't try to tell me that God sent you that virginous girl. And here you are, a 28-year-old man that's been married. You got 2 kids and now you're divorced. And so, his theology was that I had no reason to get remarried, So that was, you're asking how I dealt with it. Well, I just put my head down and did it, and at that point I was like, I can't be a preacher. I can't be ordained. So damn the torpedoes. I've got to figure something new out, So that's that wild oscillation back and forth. I give a
No, I
shit. I don't
appreciate.
give a shit.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate you just sharing that, because I think when anybody's on, when anybody makes decisions for that, like they know are what's best, and this is like something that has been coming up a lot lately, is like things don't have like life is not black and white. And we have like, maybe there is no right and wrong. Maybe there's just what feels good for you and what you need in that moment. And so, not, I love that you shared what you did, because not everyone is going to agree with it. And the more somebody doesn't understand it, the probably the more pushback and the more, I don't want to say unkind.
Vitriol.
Yeah, like it's just gonna, it's gonna come across in a very, and not a great way. It's not gonna come across in a heart-centered way, I care about you way. Or they might think that they care about you because but they're really just, you're going so against something that they're so tied to, that they won't be able to support you. And you can't take that personal, because you still have to do what's best for you at the end of the day, or else you're the one who ends up suffering. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, keep going. Let's get into the 3 years of hell as you talk about.
So let me interject one thing, and kind of bouncing off what you just said. To a person who has lived their life not being accepted and abandoned and rejected, those decisions are a lot easier to make. Because you kind of don't feel like you owe anybody anything. And I think that I've talked to a lot of people over the years who didn't have that. They had a positive experience growing up. And so they do feel obligated. They do feel like they owe people something. And I've had to say to them, look, why do you feel that way? Just because you had a good experience and this person has been a positive impact in your life, if now they're demanding that you conform your life to theirs, all bets are off. What they did in the past is great, and it's honorable, and it's worthy of mention, and you should honor that person for that. But a relationship is a constant negotiation between two people of what's acceptable. That's the basis. That's the fundamental story of what a relationship is. It's a dance. These are my boundaries. And the level of intimacy that we experience in our relationship is 100% going to be based on how much we respect each other's boundaries. And so if you say to me, I don't like it when you treat me that way, and I continue to do that, then you're not going to have as deep a level of intimacy in our relationship. And so for me, it was, some might say I had an advantage because of the way I grew up when it came to making those hard decisions, but it doesn't make them any less painful, because there's the other aspect of, I always wanted a relationship and approval from my dad, and I never got it. So, here's yet another thing that he disapproves of. So that just put more shit on me, right? But anyway, so.
Ooh, I hold on. I just want to thank you for that. Again, this is why I love talking to Mo, because it's like, it's such a like what you just said was so powerful. Because I do think that like, for example, in my own story, that I had and have a good life. My transformation and then learning how to love myself, and like learning how to set my own boundaries and all these different things, didn't come because something was awful. And I think that there is this, you do sometimes feel like you owe people, and you don't get to change, because like sometimes people have supported you up until a certain point or whatever that is. But yeah, I just think that it was a really good message. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to get back on track, because I do tend to meander, and I apologize for that. But in October of 2000, we found out that my mother had cancer. And what really pissed me off was that, she was really close to my two daughters, and I encouraged that relationship. she had they had a different experience with her than I did. But by that point, I was 28 years old, I was 29. Anyway, 30. I was actually 30. So anyway, my mother found out she had cancer, and what pissed me off the most is that she had symptoms like a year before and wouldn't go to the doctor. So by the time she went, it was stage 4. Her colon cancer had metastasized to her liver, and she had 6 months to live. And so thus began the 3 years of hell. So, everybody, my sisters and I, everybody pretty much put our lives on hold to go care for mom and to try to make her life as easy as possible. And Stacy, I got to tell you, this is the redeeming virtue of grace. There were some beautiful moments in those times. And insofar as my mom and I could heal our relationship, we did. And I came to see how she could say, I love you, and actually mean it. Because to me, her actions had never demonstrated that. But I gained some insight. So anyway, mom passed away the end of March, I think, of 2001. It was about 6 months later. And we were, reeling from that. And we didn't have a whole lot of money. I was having a hard time finding good employment. And, Sarah, we had Bo or Ash, and Jackson was on the way. So she was pregnant with Jackson, and he was born the summer after mom died. But that same summer, then one day Sarah was walking in the house. She took the kids and went and got groceries, and she was walking in the house. And she had all the grocery bags. And one of my daughters said to her, Mom, is it right that person X touches me this way? And my wife was like, do what? And she said it again. And so over the next few hours, our freaking worlds caved in, because come to find out, my ex-wife's husband had been molesting our 2 daughters for like 6 months, and we didn't know. And so Sarah called me at work and broke the news to me, and I was on my way to this guy's house. And this is one of those times where being a big person felt like a real advantage, because please don't, I hope this is not inappropriate. If it is, take it out in post. But I was on my way. I was driving 120 as fast as my truck would go. I was on my way to this guy's house, and my intention was to drag him out into the street and cut his throat from ear to ear. And I wanted to stand there and hold him up and look him in the eyes so that my face would be the last thing he saw as he slipped into hell. I was in a rage. And my wife called me and said, if you do this, you're never going to see your kids again, any of them. And you got Jackson, as a newborn. And she said, also, if you kill him, they'll go back into the household with their biological mom. And so I went home. And like I said, I was still formed in that Christian theology, and I didn't know what to do. So I walked into the bedroom where she was with the girls, and I collapsed onto the floor on my knees, and I put my arms around my wife and my 2 daughters, and I just wept uncontrollably. And I prayed, but the only thing I could pray is, God, give me wisdom, because I was so full of hatred and hurt for my daughters. And I can say that I'm very careful about saying that God answers prayers, because I really don't hold that theology anymore. But I believe that we find what we look for. And I also think that prayer is not about getting something from God or from the universe. I think prayer is about forming us. And I think one of the most valuable things that prayer does is it gives us a pause, and it gives us space. It's another way of creating space. So when I sat there on the floor and I projected out that I need wisdom, well, when I stood up, I had wisdom. And I called the police, and we got the whole process started. So that's the summer of 2001. So we talked to my dad about it, and the only compliment my dad ever gave me was when we told him what had happened. He said, "You're a bigger man than I am, because I would have killed the son of a bitch." And that's the only compliment my dad ever gave me. It meant the world to me. So anyway, flash forward another few months, and I called my dad one day. Hey, do you want to come over for dinner with us and the kids? And it had been cool to see him kind of bloom. He'd been married to my mom since he was 17 years old, so that she was the only woman he'd ever known. And he was kind of a bachelor now for about 18 months. And so he said, "Sure, yeah, I'll come over." So he didn't show up. So I start calling, leaving messages, and 9:30 at night. It was very unlike him not to do what he said he was going to do. So 9:30 that evening, I called my sister, and as she was talking to me on the phone, she just started wailing. And come to find out, there was a police officer at her front door telling her that my dad had been killed in a single car accident, 9/10 of a mile from his house. I think he may have had a heart attack, but become what may, he ran off the road and hit a tree and was killed in the accident. And then, dealing with that, but then 2 or 3 months later, my only surviving grandparent, my beloved Grandma Copeland, passed away. And then we went to trial for the abuse cases. So it was like we were on the ropes and could not catch breath. And during the trial, the church that I had formerly attended and been a youth pastor and so on and so forth, I had left that church when I got divorced, and I didn't say anything. And Stacy, this is my good intentions. I didn't want to slander I didn't want to make her look bad. So I didn't tell my story, right? I didn't tell them this is why I'm leaving. This is why I'm getting a divorce. I just left. I quit going to church there. So she was able to spin it. And so during the trial, that church actually showed up, and we're sitting in the witness room with our 2 daughters, and they were speaking in tongues and shouting and doing all the things they do in the lobby of the courthouse and claiming the victory and all of this stuff. and absolutely went on the stand and tried to eviscerate my wife's character and my character, because their only defense was that we somehow put it in our daughters' minds to make these accusations. And so all of that, it's like just a maelstrom of shit. And one day we were walking out of the courthouse, and like I said, I'm real hesitant to say that I believe there are angels, right? But if there are, I met one, because we were walking out of the courthouse, and we were downstairs and we were headed out, and we were under the weight of all of the stuff that's happened within a 2.5 year period, right? And this old African-American farmer wearing overalls and a cheap Timex watch and some old scrubby shoes, as we were going out the metal detectors and out the door, he stopped us and he took us by our hands and he said, "Ain't God good?" And man, I got freaking chills down my back. And that's all he said, was just, "Ain't God good?" And we walked out, and my wife and I looked at each other, and she goes, "That was an angel." And I said, it could be. So anyway, the guy was convicted on the first count. And then we were gearing up to go to trial on the second count. And this is when, looking back, I can see that we started to breathe again. And I got to tell you one other story. There was an old woman that we went to church with, and she was just a busybody. I couldn't stand that old lady. And I'm being very dismissive, and I'm telling an ego story about her right now. But if you knew her, you'd understand. So she came up to me one day, and this is while all this is going on, right after my dad's passed away and everything. And she came up to me and she grabbed me by the hand with her best intentions. She said, "Mo, time heals all wounds." And it was the wrong damn thing to say to me at the wrong damn time. because I put my finger right in the middle of her sternum and I said, let me tell you something. Time doesn't heal crap. All time does is gives you perspective. And I walked out and I got in the car and I was like, holy crap, I just dropped a truth bomb. That's true, because time doesn't heal anything, but it does give you enough space to see things differently with a bigger perspective. And I compare it to standing in a gallery and looking at an oil painting. If you put your nose within 6 inches of an oil painting, you can't tell what it is. It's just blobs of color. But as you begin to back away and you start to see a bigger picture, then it becomes a beautiful picture or a beautiful painting. And this is where I can look back to this moment in my life and say, this is where we can start breathing again. This is where the picture started to come into focus. Because before we were standing so close to it, we couldn't see it. But with time, we were able to get a little perspective. So we were ready to go to trial on the second case. And the DA called me and she said, hey, we've got a deal that's been offered. She said, I call her the womb donor. The biological mother has offered to sign away all of her rights to the children. And your listeners need to know that she was actually in the room sometimes when the abuse was occurring, but they didn't have enough to prosecute her. So she knew it was going on and did nothing about it. That's why it was valuable to me to take this deal. So we took the deal. She signed away all of her rights in exchange for no prosecution on the second case. And then Stacy, I think this is where you got chills before, and it always gives me chills to tell this part of my story. But months later, we're starting to live again. We're starting to things that were dormant are starting to sprout out of the soil. We're starting to see that new growth. And I was at work, and I walked in the break room, and I didn't know, but the soda machine in the main office was broken. So there was a lady from HR in our break room, and I didn't even know she was in there. And I walked in, and one of my buddies said, hey, how's it going with your wife adopting the girls? And I said, well, it's not, I said, it's a lot of money that we just don't have. And it was $3,500 is what we needed, and we just didn't have it. It was not possible. And so the HR lady turns around and she goes, I wasn't eavesdropping, but I just happened over here. And she said, you do know we have an adoption benefit, don't you? And I said, no, I had no clue we have an adoption benefit. How much is it? She said, $3,500 a year. And so within 2 days, I had a check, took it to the attorney. They got the paperwork drawn up, and Sarah was able to legally adopt Caitlin and Megan. And so we became this happy family, and we started to move forward from there. And, to me, the theological shifts and the ideological shifts feel a lot less significant probably than they were. But for me, the theological shift came out of that suffering. Because, for example, that church showing up and showing out in the lobby of the courthouse and claiming the victory in Jesus' name and everything else, that was the reason, or one of many reasons, that I started to look at theology and look at my theology and question, what in the hell is God? Is he a vending machine? Is he a cigarette dispenser that I can go to and say, hey, I want this or I want that, and if you're willing to put the right thing in, you get the right thing out. Is God quid pro quo? And so, and that's where my theology started to shift, because I realized, William Paul Young's got a little book called Lies We Believe About God. And in it, he talks about a situation where his mother-in-law was dying. And one of the family members said, well, if we could just have enough faith, God would heal her. And William Paul Young understood this guy's theology about God. And so he asked him, he said, well, okay, so how many of us would have to believe? Just would one person really having a lot of faith work? And the guy said, yeah. He said, okay, you're it. If she dies, it's your fault. And so I thought, that's exactly the way I have believed God my whole life, is that if you have enough faith, you can say to the mountain, be removed, and it'll be cast into the sea. Now my faith has shifted over the last, however long. To now I understand when Jesus said, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea. He didn't mean that God was somehow mysteriously going to come down this invisible force and rip this mountain up and throw it into the ocean. What that means is that if you have the faith as a grain of mustard seed, the tiniest amount of faith, you can pick up a damn shovel and go start digging. And through faith, you have to imagine it first. Then you can make it happen. You can go get other people and say, hey, let's move this mountain, right? And you can make it happen. And it will not happen without faith. You have to believe that it can be done. But then, like it says in James, faith without works is dead. You have to actually pick up the shovel, And so my whole theology began to change around the nature of God, the nature of forgiveness. And then I started looking at Buddhism, which we had moved on to a non-denominational, I call it a box church, but it was kind of a mega church. And Sarah and I were working in the marriage enrichment program that they had. We were group facilitators, so we were leading people through these intensive courses, and it was helping people. We really were proud of that. And one day I stumbled across a concept in Buddhism called non-attachment. And it helped me understand forgiveness because, trust me, if anybody knows what forgiveness is and is not, I do. Because there's a guy that molested my two daughters that I've had untold hours of revenge fantasies thinking about different ways that I could torture and kill that guy. Okay? I know about forgiveness. And I can tell you that if Christians could understand the Buddhist concept of non-attachment, forgiveness would be a whole lot easier. If you can't forgive somebody, it means that you're hanging on to something that you're not willing to let go of. Whether it's your pride, it's your ego, it's your pain body, it's damage that you think somebody, and if you know who you are, if you know who you really are, you cannot be diminished and you cannot be damaged. And therefore, nobody can offend you. And forgiveness becomes easy. So when I went into that marriage enrichment program and people were struggling with forgiving their spouses, normally for stupid shit, just being honest with you, he won't put his underwear in the hamper. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's the biggest thing you got, but they're struggling with unforgiveness. And I said, look, the Buddhists have got it figured out, and then, well, that came into question, and it ended with me. I've walked away from organized religion. They cautioned me about the slippery slopes. I learned how to ski. And that's, that's kind of where I am. So I've dominated the conversation for a long time, and I apologize. So how about I be quiet and let you take what you want?
Oh my gosh. No, I just I could listen to your story. Like, this is the second time that I've had I've been blessed to hear it. And it's kind of like anything. Like I heard it a whole different way, and I took so many different things from it. And I think that it's just, thank you. Like, that's really all I have to say is thank you for sharing that. Thank you for having such a brave and courageous family, for allowing you to share that story, because it's not, every time we share our story, we heal a little bit of ourselves, but we also it's the opportunity to potentially give somebody else permission to recognize that, to hear you and hear themselves in that story. And I just think it's really powerful. So there's so many, I could go, we could be here for 3 hours, honestly, talking, because I could go back to so many things that you said, but I just appreciate you more than anything. And just for sharing that. So thank you. I think there's so much wisdom in that. I don't need to add anything. So, but I do have one final question for you, if you're up for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I always like to end with this question. What is one lesson you feel like you're in the middle of learning right now?
I've heard you ask other people that. And so I tried to be prepared, and it didn't do me any good. And I think the reason is because I really am starting to suspect that there's only ever one lesson.
Go on, please.
I really am starting to think that there are not a bunch of lessons. I think the lesson is love your neighbor as yourself, because that statement encompasses you and it encompasses me. And in loving you as myself, if you think about it, there's also the connotation of a statement there. You will love others the same way you love yourself. If you have trouble loving yourself, you'll have trouble loving other people. And then there's the whole dichotomy that Eckhart Tolle talks about and Ram Dass talked about. Who's this self that you're loving, right? So you can get to another level of examination where there's not a duality of self. And you and I are one. And I, one of the things I came to while we were out in the desert is everybody talks about connection. We're connected. Connection to me is two train cars that are hooked up. They're linked, but they're still two train cars. They're two individual train cars that are linked. That's connected. I don't think that's the reality of our universe. You and I are one. We're not connected. We are one. And the stars that the iron, the iron in our blood came from ancient stars. And the same energy that created everything in the universe that manifests itself is you and is me. And so that I think that's the only lesson there is. And when now with this new way of viewing the world that I have, or it's a very old way of viewing the world that I've discovered, there's a very curious scripture in the New Testament. I think it was Apostle Paul said, "Let this same mind be in you that was also in Jesus Christ, who didn't think it was robbery to consider himself equal with God." And so the command there is you think the same way that Jesus Christ did. And he didn't think that he was taking anything away from God to consider himself equal with God. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that I'm going to say, oh, you have to worship me because I'm God. Or, hey, let's all worship Stacy because she's God. What that means is that you are God manifested in flesh. You are a material form that is nothing but pure divinity. And so when the scriptures say, how can you say you love God whom you haven't seen if you hate your neighbor whom you have seen? The only way you can love God is to love people, because people are a manifestation of God. And so to say I love divinity, God, the universe, whatever, but I don't like this guy. Well, that guy is God. He is God manifested in material form. And so I think that's the only lesson there is. And everything else is just trying to peel away onion layers. We can learn techniques. We can learn pragmatic advice about this is how you peel away the layer. This is what you do with the layer once you've peeled it away. This is how we redress suffering in the world, or this is how we should behave. That's all pragmatic stuff. But I think the only lesson is love your neighbor as yourself. And if you nail that, everything else takes care of itself.
That is beautifully, beautifully said. And I think a perfect place to just stop this particular conversation, because nothing is solved through separation. But that is the world that, like, it's always interesting to me, because I think about the fact that to me, whatever God it is that you believe did not create anything to be separate. Like you said, it created, like, we were created in this sense of oneness, and anything that does separate us was created by man, not God.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love you. You have just been such an amazing soul in my life. If people want to connect with you, what is the best? I know that, and we will 100% be highlighting your book when you have it done. But how can people connect with you in the meantime if they have questions or like, are you open to that, first of all? And if so, how could they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm absolutely open to it. Unfortunately, the depths of my technical knowledge are run about as deep as the common mud puddle. Um, so I can feel free to find me on Instagram. I think my handle on Instagram is like Mo
I'll find
Cope.
it. I'll
Yeah, so
find
if you
it.
want to share that, and then my email, they're welcome to email me at Mo_Jazzman, Jazzman at yahoo.com. And by the way, that handle is because I love to play jazz, but my dad, when he died, I inherited a 1962 Fender Jazzmaster guitar. So that's one of the meaningful things in my life. But
I love
yeah.
that. I love that.
So, hey, before you go, will you indulge me for like 3 minutes?
Always.
Okay. So I don't know this, as you know, I love to write poetry and I love to write. So the other day I had a conversation with someone and this poem came pouring out of me in about 10 minutes. And it basically didn't have to be edited. It just flowed out. But I wrote it because of the newest tragedy that's really like destroying me and pulling my heartstrings is recognizing how many kids, not just for all sorts of differences, have been basically disinherited and abandoned by their parents and unloved by their parents because of a theological difference or whatever. And it's that identification, that separation that you were talking about. And it just destroys me to think that a parent could look at their child and say, I don't love you because you're gay, or I don't love you because you're not Christian anymore, or whatever. And so I was feeling that really strongly after this conversation the other day. And so I wrote this poem. And if you don't mind, can I read it real quick?
I would love it.
It's called My Child of Sorrow. I wasn't there when you were born. I didn't squeeze you from between my thighs, sweating and moaning and pushing. I didn't smile proudly at your arrival. I simply knew nothing of it since I wasn't there, oblivious, living my own existence. I didn't raise you or teach you. I didn't form you into some version of myself. No presuppositions passed along. We didn't play catch or chase. No tickle fights or bedtime stories told. You were not my child. I wasn't there as you were broken, bent under the weight of your difference, shaped by a world of intolerance. Your fear and aloneness echoed in lonely rooms, gymnasiums, and prom dances. No one could hear the sound of it. But you stood, brave little fucker. You stood and lifted a finger to the world of people held captive by their notions. Your fear turned to rage. You came out of that closet swinging, proving who your enemies were. Maybe you understood what unconditional love feels like. Lucky one you were. Or perhaps you never got it. Never daring to dream you were worthy of such a gift, giving up on acceptance. Maybe you settled for tolerance, for just not being battered and broken, but there's hope yet. I wasn't there then, but I am now, and I love you dearly. I want to be your family. We are still different on the surface, but underneath, our oneness lies quietly, a thermocline of warmer water. You are my son or daughter, though in truth I've never gazed with love upon you. I imagine holding you. I wrap you in my long arms, squeeze you tightly into my being. You belong here, my child of sorrow. Maybe we'll weep together, crying out the pent-up brokenness, or laugh until our sides ache. I'm finally here, sweet darling. I love you and you're worthy of it. Let's walk together. Reclaim the broken kid inside. Let's make the little fellow welcome. Child of sorrow no more.
Okay, well, if now this is video, it's on video that I am crying. That was beautiful. Beautiful, Mo. And I would love to incorporate that in the show notes of this episode so that people can read that back. Because it is truly a beautiful, beautiful piece of work that you just read. So thank you for asking for us to hear that, because that hit my soul in a very, very beautiful way. So Mo,
I'll send it to you.
please do. And again, I can't thank you enough. And I'm just so grateful for you, for our unexpected friendship, and just in the ways that we've been able to connect. So thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, Stacy, I love you. I love Andrew. I love Cooper. I've never met your other pup, but I'd love him too, I'm sure. I love your listeners. Yeah, I love everyone. I love all of you. And I'm so grateful that you gave me this opportunity. It has more meaning to me than you can imagine. So thank you for what you're doing, and I'll tell you like I always do, keep shining, young lady, keep shining.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Mo.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that was a very, very powerful episode with Mo, and I hope you enjoyed Mo's company as much as I do. And welcome to the Evolve Beyond Limits post show. In this post show, I wanted to highlight something that Mo said that just made me think, and I hope that it'll make you think too. And that was that everything is created out of darkness. So, doing what is best for you, or following what your heart and soul is calling for, isn't actually what always seems fun or makes you happy in the moment. That's a very different, and that type of chasing situations and things and thinking that that's going to make you happy is often ego driven. When you look beyond that, what you truly need to be happy, or doing what's best for you, or doing what your heart and soul is calling for, is often what you need to grow and evolve. And where that is found is in the chaos. Sometimes it's in the sadness, and sometimes it's in the pain. It's in the darkness. It's in choosing to look where you've never looked before. It's in the choosing to bring to the surface what feels hard. It's about examining those aspects of ourselves that we fear the most, that we've been avoiding. Every child is created in the darkness of the womb, and so is every creative idea, every breakthrough, and every rebirth. Whether you are male or female, it is in this pelvic bowl where our feminine energy gives us life. I don't want you to shy away from the darkness. Instead, know that no matter how dark or how hard or how painful it gets, everything, even light, is created out of being willing to sit in the darkness. So I'm going to give a worksheet that I'm going to attach, and it's the Transforming Karma worksheet. And I want you to take a look at this because, Steve Jobs said that you can't connect the dots looking forward. And this worksheet is going to allow you to see that, one, you have made it through every hard or difficult situation that has ever been presented in your life. But it's also there so that you can see that every hard, difficult, or painful moment in your life was a lesson or a gift that came from it. And to take it one step further, being able to share that will give you the opportunity to not only transform your karma, but help other people along the way. So take a minute, check that out. I would love for you to text me at 248-206-3431. Hop on my text list so that we can connect. And I want to hear what you took from this episode. Maybe where is the darkness that you've been avoiding? How about the things that you realize that you've made it through that you have never really given yourself credit for? If you can, share this episode with somebody who you think would benefit from hearing it. Tag Mo and I on Instagram. We would love to hear your biggest takeaways. And if you are loving the podcast, it means the world to me if you're willing to take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe. So until the next episode, be bold, be brave, but most importantly, just be you.